as I was reading through it, I thought to myself, maybe a fella was the quote unquote mother of feminism, namely her, son-in-law, Shelley, right?
Yeah. So Shelley is her son-in-law. She never met him because she died giving birth to Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. We know her from
which I just wanted to like so much, but found it so boorish and emotional and mopey.
That's the Romantic period, though. I mean, that's kind of what they were all about. Like,
but
they
when
were
was Dracula
rejecting...
written? Because I love parts of Dracula.
I don't know when Dracula was written, but yeah, that's a good question.
But yeah, I just found it.
But wouldn't you be mopey? I mean, Mary Shelley had a pretty miserable life. I mean, she's
now tell us about that. Right, her mother.
Yeah, so her mother dies in childbirth. I mean, this awful story, like the doctor didn't wash his hands and she got an infection and she was dead within 10 days. And so Mary Godwin, her father was also a very well-known thinker who was totally against monogamy. He was all for, like, how do we get rid of monogamy? He actually was influential on the work of Marx.
This is Wollstonecraft's
husband.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that they even got married was pretty remarkable. But Wollstonecraft had already had a child out of wedlock, and she saw how hard it was for her first child. So she thought, we'll get married and then it will be easier for all the girls to have a father, just in terms of society. So anyway, so then Mary Godwin grows up. Her father marries another woman, and there's some other children that the stepmother has. And then I think Godwin and his new wife had another child. So anyway, the family's rapidly growing, but nobody's really getting along. It's kind of just a messy life. Although at one point, interestingly, the Godwins hosted Aaron Burr after he shot Hamilton, which I found to be an interesting footnote. But so he's well known. I mean, he was very much a kind of a celebrity of his day. So he attracts this young man, Percy Shelley, who's just been thrown out of Oxford, and he's married, and his wife is expecting, I think, their second child. And he's fascinated because, of course, he knows Mary Wollstonecraft's work, he knows Godwin's work, and he's also has this kind of wealth that is unusual to us in a certain respect because it was based on his family and what his father's title was and what he was going to inherit once his father died. And so he could make loans based on his title and the estate and whatnot. And so this was what he and Shelley were sort of drawn to each other. Godwin needed money and Shelley had the money, and Godwin had the ideas and Shelley dreamed of the ideas, and kind of this, just had this, he was very much like this rogue cad. Like, he was just totally unrestrained by really anything. So he meets Mary Godwin, and they immediately fall in love and fall for each other. He convinces her to leave with him. He leaves his wife. The two of them run off, along with her stepsister, who was from the new wife. The three of them, Claire is her name. I think her name was initially Jane, and she changed it to Claire because it was more exotic. So the three of them run off to France, and it's this debacle. It's supposed to be this romantic getaway, and it ends up, and they're like broke and seasick, and everything awful happens to them. So they would go back to England. Finally, Shelley's wife kills herself, and so Shelley and Mary Godwin, they're able to marry, and they have children. There's a lot of details, and I guess that's the great part about just focusing on Shelley and kind of what he did, because really the grandfather, he's the grandfather of feminism. He's the one that came up with the idea for the ideal woman
That's what I found was interesting.
Yeah.
So Wollstonecraft writes this work, and she has some ideas, but it's really her son-in-law who's into all sorts of rubbish.
Like, you name it,
spiritualism or demonic kind of occult activity.
Yep.
Locked himself in a tomb in a church and tried to summon something.
The devil.
Like, this is where feminism comes from. That's just wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think when we think of free love, which is such a euphemism, right? Because it's neither free nor is it loving. It's sort of like enslaved passion, I suppose.
Right.
When you think of that sort of thing, you think about people wanting to tear down monogamy, and unless you know something of history, which I don't know a great deal, I suppose, you would just assume that this was like a new idea, like in the 60s or something. And, but no, this goes all the way back to the beginning.
It's all recycled. And you also have So yeah, he's taking Wollstonecraft's ideas and Godwin's ideas of free love and sort of putting them together. So while Mary Shelley is writing Frankenstein, he's writing about this woman named Cythna, who is this ideal woman. The first woman in all of literature, I think, that didn't have a husband, didn't have children. She wasn't encumbered by all these relationships. She did have a relationship with the devil. I think that was her one relationship, but conveniently, I guess, for Shelley's purposes. But yeah, that became the model for these later feminists at that point after that.
Right, and what's interesting too is Shelley's interpretation of Milton's Satan. So talk about that.
Yeah, so he's really, using Paradise Lost and reading into it, and he sees that Satan is sort of the hero, and he actually goes back and rewrites Genesis 3 so that Eve is no longer, this weak link or tempted or anything like that. But in fact, she is actually, the serpent gives her an opportunity that she is able to acquire this special kind of knowledge because of her relationship with the serpent. So he basically takes what had been up to that point sort of Christian orthodoxy of, you've got this hierarchy of God and man, and Eve is the helpmate, and then the creatures that they name, and inverts that order. So the serpent is talking to Eve, and then Eve is lording over man, and God's nowhere. Wow. Yeah. So it's this remarkable inversion. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, again, if we can call Shelley the grandfather of feminism or the father of it, which is so interesting. It's kind of like when a woman complains about the patriarchy while she has her husband's last name or her father's last name. But so the beginning of this is from a man who thought that Satan was the hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Just so we're clear.
I know. Yeah. And I think that's the astounding thing. I mean, I would say almost no woman knows this. Like we just we've been told what feminism is like and where it's come from and how it's supposed to operate, that it's not discussed that it was actually concocted by a man. So
I'm not even sure if the Satanism would turn modern women off today who are into feminism. They would probably just think, oh, good. That was very enlightened of him to realize this so soon.
Yeah. But that's his legacy. I mean, that's what he created, was that way in which, you see he has to go all the way back to Genesis 3 and recreate the whole story and, start at the beginning.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.